स्टार्ट कर दो. Well, good morning. Now, in yesterday's class, we had started to talk about empathy, and we had seen a lot of empathy as an emotional intelligence. That what exactly empathy is, how do we understand empathy, how do we conceptualize empathy. We had also seen that what is the origin of empathy, source of innate as well as social, combination of that to create sympathy in us in a way. We had also seen that what is the problem that the people face when they have low empathy, and what is the advantage of high empathy, what exactly empathy does to us to live a positive life, a good life in a way. So, all of the aspects of empathy we had seen in yesterday's class. Today we will talk about the more exact aspect of empathy, more behavioral aspect of empathy, the emotional competence is based on that. So, write down firstly, on the basis of empathy, the following emotional competences have been identified. On the basis of empathy, the following emotional competences have been identified. First one, understanding others, which is sometimes also called simply empathy. Understanding others or empathy. So, when we use the term empathy, then these are the two important can say context or meaning for which we use this term. One that we had talked about yesterday, empathy as an emotional intelligence, and today we will talk about empathy as an emotional competence. So, if there is a question on in your can say exam that write a short note on empathy or something like this, then this is what you have to write. In fact, it was a question few years ago that write a short note on empathy. So, in that case you can say in such a question you can use this, you can write this as a part of your answer. Good morning. So, as a part of your answer, this is something that you have to write, empathy as an emotional competence. So, let us see what exactly this means. Write down further. It is our ability to understand, others' feelings and perspectives. It is our ability to understand others' feelings and perspectives, and to take active interest in their concerns. So, this is how we can define empathy in this manner, simple language. So, if somebody asks you to define empathy, then this is the definition that you have to write there. So, this definition you can remember, you can use that in any case study also, or a direct question whenever you have to write about empathy. It is the exact to the point definition of empathy. Now, let us see what exactly this definition means. What exactly does it indicate? So, let us talk about that a little. Write down further. The people who are high in this competence, thank you. The people who are high in this competence, number one, they are sensitive to the emotional cues of others. They are sensitive to the emotional cues of others. So that is the first important sign of empathy. The idea here is that, as we have been talking about throughout this course here, that emotions are something that we always feel inside us, always. So every moment you can say some emotions are there in our life, in our mind or not. And since we feel emotions always, so we always keep on expressing our emotions also. Well, sometimes you can say in the form of facial expression, gesture, posture, intonation, if we speak. So by all these manner, again touching somebody for example, so by all these ways we keep on expressing our emotions always, we all of us do that. Now if you look at empathy here, then we often say that empathy is, we can say possibly that empathy is a type of radar into our mind which allows us to pick up those emotional cues of other people. So at every moment, everybody around us keeps on expressing some emotion and we keep on picking up that emotion almost unconsciously or subconsciously also, maybe without being aware, without making an effort for that. So we all have that internal radar to pick up the emotional cues of other people. Now these people that I am talking about, the people who are high in empathy, their radar is very sensitive radar. So their radar is very sensitive because they can look at the emotion, they can pick up the emotion of other person even if a small cue is available to that. They are the people, they have very good empathy profile. I hope yesterday we had talked about empathy Pons profile. That profile of nonverbal sensitivity, the Robert Rosenthal's method that we discussed yesterday. So these people are like A, whose profile is the topmost line that we had drawn yesterday's class. So this is the first important sign of empathy, that they understand other people's, you can say, emotions in that manner, in a more better manner in a way. That is the first important thing. Second thing that defines empathy, a more important part of that, first we had already talked about yesterday, you can refer to that Pons profile, sensitivity profile, whatever you can call it. Second point, write down further, they listen well. They listen well. Now, listening, as we will see, is a very important aspect of emotional intelligence in general and empathy in particular. Listening is so important that I would like to discuss a little more detail about what exactly listening means and how important role does listening play in our life. So let's talk about little more about listening here. But before we talk about listening, tell me one thing, that whenever we talk about listening, then we often differentiate between listening and hearing. Often we talk about both of these things slightly different from each other. Now, if you look at both of them, then you know that in both of them, listening and hearing, well, we receive the verbal information from other people. Verbal information. When somebody speaks and we receive that information auditorily, then that can be listening also, that can be hearing also. Both of them are same in that aspect, but there is a very subtle difference between the two. Can you tell me what is the difference between the two? Well, many of my students, first thing that my students tell me in my physical classroom is that they say that, well, in hearing you can say understanding may not happen and in listening understanding happens. No, that is not the most important difference. In hearing also understanding happens, a different type of understanding, but nevertheless understanding may happen. In a court of law, for example, hearing happens. That does not mean that judges do not understand anything that the lawyers say. They understand every single word spoken by the lawyer, but even then that is hearing, not listening. So listening is something different than we can say a hearing word. What are the difference? Well, I will not go in much detail of that. We will discuss listening in much detail shortly. But some of the basic difference we can see could be that listening, first of all, is an active process. Hearing can be a passive process. So in hearing, you can say you can close your eyes and receive all the information from the other person, understand everything, close your eyes, you don't have to do anything. You sit quietly, close your eyes and receive all the information. That is hearing. But in listening, you cannot do like that. Listening requires you to do something, some activity on your part. What is that activity? We'll see that shortly. But listening always requires some active, you can say, participation of the person. Second important thing is that in listening, you can say listening requires a certain, in listening we are involved in the process of communication. In hearing we are not. So not necessarily. So in the case of listening, we become part of the process of communication. In hearing, we can be outsider. You can sit outside and receive all the information. Well, that will be hearing. Listening requires some involvement. What is the meaning of that involvement? We will see that shortly. So there can be many other differences also, but at the root of all these differences, well, one of the basic thing that you can say here is that listening to a great extent is is an emotional process, and hearing to a great extent is the rational process. We'll see the meaning of that shortly. But here one thing that we can simply remember, that to a great extent listening is an emotional process and hearing is a rational process. That is the basic difference between the two that we can realize, that we can understand. Now let us see what is the meaning of a good listening. What is, you can say, good listening? Write down further. The people who are high in this competence, the people who are high in, sorry, as a good listener, cut that previous one, write down further. As a good listener, they show the following characteristics. As a good listener, they show the following characteristics. So these are the characteristics of a good listener. First one, write down further. They create a positive and welcoming. They create a positive and welcoming environment. They create a positive and welcoming environment in which the others may feel it comfortable. They create a positive and welcoming environment in which the others may feel comfortable to communicate. In which the others may feel comfortable to communicate. So, that is the first important sign of a good listener, creating a positive environment. What is the meaning of that? It essentially means that if you look at us, the human beings, then we all have, suppose for example, there is a person like A, me, you or anybody, then we all have inside us many different layers of inhibitions, some sort of barriers which prohibits the other people to come closer to us. We often bound ourselves many levels of barriers. Suppose for example, well, which prohibits other people from coming closer to us. Suppose or we going closer to somebody else. Suppose for example, you are in some public place, in a metro, in a bus, sitting somewhere in a park somewhere. Suddenly a stranger comes to you and he asks you, what's your name please? Now sometimes what happens that we do not share our name also with that person. We become apprehensive. Why are you interested in my name? Why do you ask? We don't share our name also. But there are some people who ask us in such a manner that not only name, we share our phone number also, WhatsApp ID also, and social media ID for Instagram, etc. also, address also, and there are some people with whom we share some of the most important, most central information about ourselves as well. So, most crucial information, most sensitive information, most critical information about ourselves also, sometimes we share with some people the way they ask us. Because if you look at us, the human being, as Gabriela Garcia Marquez, one of my favorite author, he had said that every person lives three lives. We all have three lives: public life, private life, and secret life. What are they? Public life is the one about which everybody is aware. So, my public life is that everybody in the world, maybe whoever is interested, that person can be aware of that, my name, qualification, profession, address, etc. People know about that, everybody, and I don't have any problem with sharing with that thing with anybody perhaps in general. That is our public life, we are open about that. There is a private life, second, in which we are open only to some people around us, our family members, our friends, our relatives, etc. They know a lot about our private life, which others are. So, which others are not available. So, people who are very close to us, normally family members, etc., they are aware of our private life. We are open to them about our private life. But there is a third life also that we live, which he calls a secret life, about which hardly any, very, very few people in the world perhaps know us. Closest friend, maybe closest of the closest friends, closest of the closest person, maybe. So, even perhaps our family members may not be aware of that aspect of our, well, life. So, we all have a public life, everybody knows about which. Private life, some people know about us. Secret life, very few, rarely somebody knows about us. We all have the three lives. Now, empathy and listening is that thing which allows us to become open to other people, sometimes even to our private life and sometimes even to our secret lives. Listening allows that to happen. Listening makes that to be possible. So, there are some people in our lives also, that when, well, we talk to them, then after some time again we feel like sharing everything with that person. So, if you feel like sharing everything with that person, then chances are high that this person may be a good listener and he might be high in empathy. So, this is what we can say is the meaning of the first point that we talk about. Allow everybody to come as close to you as possible, be open to you, perhaps even about your secret life. Only then perhaps you will understand the other people, which empathy requires. So, first important characteristics of good listener is to create a positive environment, number one. Second important part of good listening is that, write down further, they are emotionally involved. They are emotionally involved in the process of communication. They are emotionally involved in the process of communication. So, being emotionally involved is another very important sign of empathy in a way. The idea here is that being involved essentially means here, let's talk about that a little. Suppose for example, whenever we communicate with somebody, then our communication takes place maybe at three levels. There are three layers of communication is there. This is the deepest level, then second level maybe, and the uppermost level maybe. Three levels are there. At the uppermost level, we speak the words, language. So right now I am speaking English language words. Now, as we have seen in our yesterday's class, that every word that we speak, it has certain emotions behind that. It has certain emotions behind that, and depending on the emotion, as we had seen yesterday, that the meaning of the whole meaning of the word will change. So, the same word thanks can be said 100 different manner depending on what emotions are accompanying that. So, emotions, every word has an emotion behind that, and emotions actually assign a meaning, change the meaning of the word normally. And as we have seen in our introduction class, that every emotion has a cause, a triggering event. Emotions do not happen, I can say, in vacuum. So, every emotion has a trigger, every emotion has a cause. Now, if you look at it in this manner, then you can see there are some people, they, well, receive only the words, a rational part of the communication. They are the ones who do the hearing. They do the hearing, but there are some people, well, they go slightly deeper into the word, into the process, and not only get the word but understand even the emotions behind that. They are the ones who listen. And there are some people, they do not only understand emotions only, they go much deeper than that and try to understand the causes of that emotion also, which accompanies the word or emotion. They are the ones who listen well. So, for example, if you say thanks to the other person, he will be happy that yes, thanks said and work done. He will understand that behind your thanks there is an irritation. You have seen yesterday that thanks can be irritated thanks also. So, he may realize that behind your thanks there is an irritation, and he will, this third person will try to understand that if you feel irritated while saying thanks to me, why so? If I try to understand that, why are you irritated when you say thanks to me, then perhaps my understanding of you will be much, much better. That is what is the listening, good listening qualities. That is the reason also that you know that in a court of law, hearing happens. Because judges in the court of law are not expected to be moved by the emotion. So emotions are not something that you have to consider only the rational part of the word every, and that is the reason that in a court of law that lawyers are so particular about the word. Every word that they speak, they weigh it out first. So every word that they speak, they often try to evaluate properly that the exact word, appropriate word. In our personal life, when we talk to each other, are we so particular about the words that we speak like a lawyer? Of course not. Very often you can see we use very inappropriate word also. We use very, you can see the wrong word also, and even then the other person understands what exactly we want to say. And even if the other person does not understand, then we try to make the other person understand by prompting him. We often tell the person that don't go for the word, understand the emotions behind, feelings behind that. So we often understand the feelings behind that, understand the emotions behind that, understand the meaning. I may have used a wrong word maybe, but I did not mean bad. So we try to make the other person understand the feelings behind each word. We are not that particular like a lawyer when we speak to each other. So that is what is the meaning of the term good listening. That, well, this is listening well, a good listener. Don't listen to receive the words only, go deeper and the deepest maybe. That is the meaning of the term involvement. That go deeper into the process of communication rather than skimming only at the surface. So that is the second important meaning of the term listening, characteristics of the good listener. Third one, write down further. They provide appropriate and timely feedback to the others. They provide appropriate and timely feedback to the others, which may be verbal or non-verbal. That is a third and another very important aspect of good listening, that your ability to provide appropriate feedback to the other person. What does that mean? It essentially means that whenever we can say listen to somebody else, then that's the meaning of the term active process. That you cannot passively receive all the information, you have to actively do something, which means basically giving a feedback. This feedback may be verbal. Verbal feedback may be what? By saying say yes or no. So sometimes we keep on saying a small word while listening again, yes, no. By this we are actually prompting the other person, encouraging the other person to communicate more. Sometimes it can include asking appropriate questions. So asking question is a very important part of listening also, because by asking appropriate question, we often tell the other person that I am understanding you, but not only that, I want to understand you more. So these questions are actually an assurance that yes, I am interested in what you are saying. I want to know more of what you are saying. You encourage that other person to open up to you once again. But remember, question must be appropriate. If you ask an inappropriate question, then that is a sign of bad listening. That's why in my class also, a number of times I have told you, perhaps in this whole thing, that when you ask a question, then ask only a question related to that topic. Normal out of the topic question you should ask either at the end of the class or in the beginning. But in the middle of the class, you must focus only on what we are talking about. Ask appropriate question, that is a sign of good listening. If you start asking random questions in between, then that may be a sign of bad listening. So ask an appropriateness is very important word, because inappropriate question actually tells the speaker that yes, you are not actually interested in what is being listened, what is being communicated, you are interested in something else. So that will inhibit the other person to communicate better in a way. So asking question, appropriate question, well, is a very important part of a good listening. Second one, sometimes you can say it can be rephrasing and restating the same thing, well, in your own language. So when we listen to somebody, then we actually sometimes whatever the other person speaker has said, we rephrase that in our own language, and restate it back to the other person to get a confirmation, is it what you meant? So by this again we are trying to assure the person, okay, not only I am interested in understanding what you say, but I actually understand or not, and I want to get validation of my understanding, that what you said and what I understood, are they same or not. So sometimes restating the same thing, also giving an example of what other person is explaining, sharing your experience related to that particular topic that is being communicated, well, all of these are important part of a verbal feedback. So that is another important. Restate the same thing, or that should not be very often. It should be, well, time bound. It should be slightly, well, strategically located in a way. So these are some of the common ways through which we provide non-verbal feedback to the other person. There are others also that you can think, giving an example, sharing an experience, etc. But the most important type of feedback is the non-verbal feedback. What is a non-verbal feedback? Well, non-verbal feedback may involve things like, for example, you can say nodding of the head, or you can say making a proper eye contact, or you can see the alignment of the body with your body with the other person, gestures, postures, etc., etc. Touch also sometimes. So all these things are important part of the good listening in a way. Nodding of the head, if you look at it, or any of them. You know, a few years ago I remember that I was reading an interesting interview of you can say of 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, maybe. I was reading an interview of Mark Tully. I hope that you remember his name. You know his name. Mark Tully is a well-known journalist in India. He was a head of, you can say, one important part of the BBC Hindi at one point of time. At one point of time, he was virtually synonymous with BBC Hindi. Now, due to some differences with the management of the BBC, he resigned from BBC. Then after he stayed in India itself, perhaps he stays in Delhi or Kolkata somewhere. And he is a well-known person in the media circle in Delhi, in India. He often writes newspaper columns also, comes in some TV channel discussions also. So, well-known person in the media circle. Now, after he resigned from BBC, then one interesting interview I read about him taken by Dilip Padgaonkar, published in the Times of India. Dilip Padgaonkar was the editor of Times of India at that time, a very good interviewer. Now, Padgaonkar asked him that you have been in India for last 30-40 years. Now, what is it about India that you find most Indians? What is it about Indians that you find most confusing? And he said, Mark Tully, the most confusing thing that I find about Indians is the way they nod their head. Because everywhere else in the world, the way I have found that is, he said that the vertical nodding means yes and horizontal nodding means no. So, vertical nodding means yes and horizontal nodding means no. But in India, he said that most of the people, most of the time, for both yes and no, they only horizontally nod. Then after that makes, you can say, me confused sometimes when I talk to the Indians here. Then after I actually start observing the Indians, you can say here, people around me, and I actually found that is true. If I ask you, did you got it? Yes, yes, I got it. You say yes, but your head is like this one. So, in my classroom, physical classroom, the moment I talk about this, many students, yes, sir, you are right. You are saying yes, sir, but you are actually nodding like this one. He said that I get confused that your word is something else and your nodding is something else. What to trust? Should I trust your verbal or non-verbal part? So he gets confused in that. He says this is most confusing when I talk to Indians here. Now the question is that do we get confused like him? Of course not. We do not get. We know that when this horizontal nodding is yes, and we know that when it is no. He is perhaps not Indian enough. That's why perhaps he doesn't, because Indian culture often, as you have seen in our earlier class yesterday, that culture does have an impact on the, you can see, emotional expression. So that may be the thing. But idea here is that these are non-verbal cues are very effective way of giving feedback to the other people. Through non-verbal feedback, we can actually make a one-to-one communication, even in a one-to-all, one-to-many type of communication. So it is a very effective way of communicating with other person, non-verbal feedback that creates a much positive and encouraging or welcoming environment for the people to communicate better. That is the feedback. All of that, gestures, postures, eye contact, the way you talk to the people, the way you interact, the way you sit in front of the other person, the way you hold the hand of the other person, put your hand on the shoulder of the other person. So all these things we can say provide the feedback to the other person, and that feedback ultimately encourages us to speak more and allow the other person to understand more. So feedbacks play a very important role. Most important, verbal feedback is important, no doubt, but non-verbal feedback is even more important. Then finally the third one, fourth one, write down, they listen uninterruptedly. They listen uninterruptedly. Interruption is a big problem of communication in a way. So some people have a very irritating habit of interrupting the other person. Every time when you interrupt the other person, you actually create a barrier in the communication, that wall that we were talking about. So because each time when we interrupt, that wall is created which separates us from the other people. It discourages the other person to communicate more comfortably with you in that case. So interruption is a big problem. That's why I told you that in the feedback also in the previous topic. So that is what we can talk about. So here we talk about even asking question or rephrasing things like, for example, that, well, as I told you, that should be timely. These two words I actually used there. You can say the deliberately. Timely and appropriate feedback. Feedback must be appropriate, number one, but it must also be timely. You must ensure that your feedback should not become an interruption. So you must wait for an appropriate moment to give a feedback also. Wait for a pause. Asking question, for example. So do not ask a question abruptly at any point. So wait for a pause when a person stops, or take a permission, okay, I want to ask a question. And let the other person decide when he wants to take up your question, rather than interrupting the other person by asking questions. So feedback must be, particularly verbal feedback, must be more timely, you can say, focused in a way. So it should not become an interruption. Interruption is a big problem of communication. Very often it is seen that people, while communicating, their focus is more on interruption rather than understanding. They keep on looking for a word. The moment people find a word, some important word, they interrupt the other person, they start speaking. So we listen not in order to understand, we listen in order to react or respond. That is a bad listening. Good listening means that listen to the other person not in order to interrupt or respond or react. Listen to that person in order to understand. You must be very clear what is the purpose of listening. Purpose of listening for you is only to understand the other person. That is the important thing here that we have to understand. Sometimes I consider that if you want to understand a concept, then it is better sometimes to understand what this concept is not. And this is why if you want to understand what is listening, good listening, then sometimes, or communication, then sometimes it might be more effective to understand what communication and listening is not. And if you want to understand what communication is not, then I may suggest you that sometimes watch the program of Arnab Goswami on Republic channel. I have seen here that when when he talks to somebody, then he takes around 2 minutes to ask a question. He will repeat his question 3 times. But when you start responding to him, then, well, within 20 seconds, he interrupts the other person. He cannot keep quiet more than 20 seconds at a stretch. I have seen this is problem. I sometimes watch his program more as an entertainment program rather than a news program. So when you feel like, you can say, sleeping sometimes in the night and want to get up, then watch his program for 20 minutes, 10 minutes, and you will feel energized. So if you want to understand what communication is not, then watch many news channels in India, most important prominent being Arnab Goswami's. So that is what a listening is not. That is what communication is not. Main purpose of communication and listening is to understand other people rather than to interrupt the other person. So these are some of the important characteristics of a good listener. Let me see some questions we have or not. Shubham, sir, does listening regulate our cortisol level? If the situation is by listening we become angry, then this listening should be affecting us. Yes, Shubham, it is right that listening may actually sometimes involve our cortisol level. In that case, the idea is that we have to control. We'll talk about in the next topic here that empathy always requires a certain level of self-control. If the self-control is not there, empathy will never be. It will be difficult to have. Lack of self-control actually blunts empathy. So self-control is very important. So cortisol level may be high. Sometimes you have impulse to respond, a shout maybe, but you must control that impulse. You must realize that yes, your purpose in this communication is to understand rather than to fight. So self-control is a necessary condition for that. But yes, sometimes it can increase your cortisol level. It can actually increase your impulsivity maybe, particularly when the other person is, well, saying something that you extremely dislike. But self-control is an important part of, listening process, empathy. Next question, Subhashri. Sir, does a good listening has two part, affirmation and negation, which is outcome of rephrasing? Yes, Subhashri, it can be affirmation and negation both. So that both way you actually you are encouraging the other person. Negation also is a very good type of feedback, because by negating you are actually letting the other person to further clarify. So if you don't agree with me on some topic, then it's very important to negate me. Sir, I don't agree with you. Then that will encourage me to speak more, perhaps, to clarify more what is it that I want to say. So negation is a very important part of feedback. Both affirmation and negation plays an important role in that. Yes, you are right. Next one, Biswajit. Is misunderstanding a cause of a bad listening? Very, very often. Most often you can say, Vishwajit, misunderstanding is caused by, I can say, lack of empathy, most importantly lack of listening ability, bad listening. We'll talk about that also shortly. Further also that how, or other than can say, no, we'll talk about that in the next topic also. That why you can say lack of empathy and bad listening may lead to misunderstanding. We'll see that shortly. So, these are the important, you can say, characteristics of a good listener. Now, listening, as we will see, plays a very important role in our, well, social interaction, in our communication process in a way. According to one research, some research that I was, you can say, reading about some times ago, that think of it, in any practical, say, informal, no, you can say, is symmetrical situation between two people, think of it, around 22% of our communication involves reading. 23% of our communication involves speaking. But 55%, think of it, 55% of our communication normally involves listening. 55% of our communication involves listening. That is the role of listening in a day to day. Remember, communication involves both reading and both, all the three, reading most was aside, both speaking and listening. People often think that communication means speaking only. No, communication means speaking and listening. Listening is more. 55% of communication that we have normally with the people around us may involve listening. 22% may be reading, when you read the message, WhatsApp message, or you can say the email, etc., in a formal setting, in a symmetrical setting, not in a classroom like this. In a classroom like this, I speak more and you have to listen more. It is an asymmetrical situation. So my position makes me to speak more, and your position in the situation makes you to listen more. But when we are in an equal situation in an office, for example, then listening may involve around 55% on an average. Some people, some situation more, somewhere less. Overall, in a symmetrical situation, 55% of our communication often involve listening. Listening is that important in the process of communication. And we often see that listening is one ability that these days we are actually losing. We are becoming bad in that. Listening has become, you can say, one of the casualty in the modern time. A large number of people have actually stopped listening. And that lack of listening, which results into a lack of empathy between the people, is a major cause of social conflict that we have in the society. Lots of conflict that we are seeing. And in that lack of listening ability that the people have, one of the major role is played by the social media. Because on social media, when we interact with the other people, think of it. When we interact with other people, then our interaction often involve only the written words, reading part in a way. Written word, a little, you can say, emojis and all, that also plays a role. So other things do not happen much. Because of that, our understanding on social media often becomes very shallow, and that encourages people to become more abusive, more rough, more arrogant, more, you can say, nasty also. Just imagine a person, suppose there is somebody on your social media. Now suppose that person is a big troll. You know, these days we can find large number of trolls in India. So that person is a big troll. Whenever you write something on your social media, then that person comes to you and that person starts trolling you badly, abusing you all the time because of your political opinion or because of religious belief, whatever you can see. That person appears to be a very bad person, very abusive, very big troll and all. Now suppose you meet the same person in face-to-face interaction and try to talk him. Do you think that in a face-to-face interaction he will appear as bad as he appeared to you on a social media? Number one. Number two, face-to-face interaction, would he be actually as bad with you, as arrogant or abusive with you as he was on social media? In both the question, answer is a unqualified no. So in face-to-face interaction, he will also be not that abusive. He will be more courteous maybe. And he will not appear very bad to you also when you talk to him. Why so? Because when we look at face-to-face conversation, which we talk to each other face-to-face, then we don't get only words. We look at the body also. So our mirror neuron, maybe possibly, we keep on picking up that radar we have in our mind. We keep on picking up every emotional cues, facial expression, or you can see the intonation of the voice, body language, gesture, posture, all these things again we keep on picking, and accordingly our understanding keeps on changing. So there is a to and fro process when we talk to each other in a face-to-face interaction, which does not happen in a social media interaction. So face-to-face interaction, neither will he be as bad to you as he was on social media, and nor will he appear as bad to you as he appears to you on the social media. Your understanding between the two will be much better in the face-to-face interaction than when it was on a social media. So this is why we often suggest that it's a requirement of the time today that we should spare some time out of our social media and try to interact with the people, well, in the face, particularly those people whom we do not like, those people who are well bad to me in a way. So that plays a very important, that will play a very important role in making us, you can say, understand each other well. But problem with us, and in this case, in order to encourage people to understand each other and listen well, we believe that school has to play a very important role. Because think of it, school. In schools, for example, whenever we have some communication program like speech, you can say giving, or the group discussion, or you can say the debate, for example, whatever. Whenever such communication program happens, then what is it on which we mostly emphasize the most? Well, we emphasize most on the speaking part. That we often recognize the best speakers. For example, we often give the first prize to the person who speaks best. So that is what we do. We hardly ever encourage the listeners. So that trend must be changed. You must encourage speaking. That is not something that we are against. Speaking is a very important part of communication. But remember, speaking is not the most important part. Only 23% of our, according to that research, result may vary for different people and all. But an idea is that speaking is not at least the most important part of a communication process. Listening is the most important part. So you must teach our children in the schools how to listen well. And along with having the best speaker award, I suggest that the schools must also have best listeners award as well. You must find out who are the students who are good listeners, recognize them, award them. Teach others also that why don't you become like him, not only like the person who speaks the best. So a school can play a very important role in that. We also suggest that just as we have many international days, just yesterday or the today perhaps the International Drawing Day, International Yoga Day we have last month. Similarly, we suggest here that we must also have an International Listening Day, where we should encourage people to listen to, particularly to those people who, you can say, whom you do not like. It is easy for us to listen to those people whom we like, but we often do not listen to those people whom we do not like. So it's very important for us to learn to listen to those people, to encourage to listen to those people whom we do not like. So this is the importance of it. There can be some question on that, that communication, listening, etc., role of listening in our life, why it is a problematic thing nowadays and how it can be improved and all. So these things you have to, you can write in the answer to that question. There was a question, let me see. How the democratic value would be hampered if the judiciary takes over the control of country because of their rational empathy? It will be very bad. Judiciary cannot take control over the country. Judiciary can, because judiciary people are not in the, on the ground. They do not know the ground reality. They only know the constitution. That's why we can say we have separated judiciary from the executive or legislature. Legislature come from the ground. They understand the ground reality, what people actually want. They suggest executive executes that, and judiciary only say that this execution should be according to the constitution. So that they should, if they start, can say, if the judiciary starts acting, taking the administration, for example, in their hand, that will be disaster. Manipur might be an example of that. Manipur problem started after judicial intervention, that judgment of the High Court. So the judiciary does not know that what is going to be the implication of this particular judgment on the ground, on the people. That legislature knows, because they are the people who are elected by the people. They are among the people. So judiciary should not take, that can lead to a big conflict in the society. It can be disaster for the society. Rational, I can say, empathy is never the way to control people. It is only emotional part that actually helps us to understand, isn't it? So judiciary will be disaster if it takes administration in its own hand, or legislation also. That is the reason that we have separated all these three parts of our governance system. That is the listening well. Then after, let's talk about third. Write on further. They understand others' perspective well. They understand others' perspectives well. Perspectives well. They understand others' perspectives well and show sensitivity towards them. And show sensitivity towards them. So that is the next important thing. The idea here is that the understanding others' perspective well is a very important part of empathy, or you can say empathy in a way. What is the meaning of the term perspective, by the way? Perspective we define as a point of view. Point of view. So what is the meaning of that? That from which point you view something. And you know that if you change the point from which you view something, you see something, then the whole meaning of that thing will change. In order to understand a perspective, I will talk about one important psychologist and his research. There was a psychologist, I can say Swiss psychologist, Switzerland, called John Piaget. He is considered to be the founder of child psychology. He was the person who single-handedly established child psychology as an important branch of modern psychology. Today we call that as developmental psychology. But he was the first person who established child psychology as a separate branch, an important branch of psychological study. He had 3 daughters, and when his daughters were growing up, then he used to do experiments on her. And on the basis of that experiment, when he saw his daughters growing from young to, we can say, adults and all, then on the basis of that observation, experiment, or can say monitoring, etc., well, he developed the whole, can say, process of child development, how children develop, every aspect, motor development, sensory development, cognitive development, emotional development, moral development, every aspect of development he tried to talk about. So his theory is, even today, more than 80 years later, well, his theory is considered one of the most extensive theory of child development. Now, so he was an important psychologist. Let's talk about one small research that he conducted. That will help us to understand this point that we are talking about. Now, what he did in that experiment? He took a young girl, one of his daughter. Suppose there is a table. He put a table in front of. Suppose the daughter is sitting here, child is sitting here. There is a table in front. Suppose on that table there is a mountain. Of course, a toy mountain. In front of that, suppose there is a church. And suppose in front of that church there is a chair sitting on which a doll is sitting. Now you ask the child, what do you see Of course, the child will say, I see a mountain in front of that, there is a church in front of that, there is a doll sitting on a chair. That is what the child will say. Suppose, for example, suppose I am on the other side of the table and you ask the child, what do I see? By the way, what would I see from the other side of the table? Of course, I will see only the mountain, because mountain will block the view of these two things there. But if you ask a small child, what do I see? Then chances are high the child will say, you also see all the three things. Child will not be able to understand that if you change the perspective, if you change the point, then you don't see the same thing. From this side of the table, you see these three things, but on the other side of the table, no, you don't see all the three things. You see only one thing, because that mountain will block the view of the other two. Child will not be able to understand that. So children do not understand even the physical perspective of others. That is the reason that that small children will get angry at you sometimes when they see something and they try to show that to you and you are not able to see that. Then they will get angry at you that why are you not? I am seeing it, it's visible to me, why is it not visible? You are lying to me, you are cheating, you are deceiving. This is what they think. They do not realize that, okay, you are on the other side of the table, you don't see what I see from this side. They don't realize that. They do not understand even the physical perspective of other people. But as they grow up, then it is seen that at around 5-6 years of age, almost every child learns automatically. You don't have to teach them. Every child automatically learns the ability to understand the physical perspective of others, that from the other side of the table, that only mountain is visible, not these two things. But empathy means your ability to understand others' emotional perspectives as well. So empathy means essentially that if somebody is feeling something, then instead of making a judgment about that person from your side, try to imagine yourself into the position of that person and then try to think, had I been on the position of that person, how would I be, how would I be, you can say, have been feeling there. That will give you much better. Perspective means that putting yourself into the position of somebody else and then try to see the thing from that side rather than from this side. This side you may see something else, from that side the person may see something else. Imagine yourself on the other side and then try to see what the other person would be seeing. That is what we call the perspective taking here. So, there is a famous quotation of some philosopher, you may have heard about this. Somebody had said, some philosopher had said that before you make a judgment about me, then walk in my shoes for some time. Walk in my shoes for some time. Now that's an interesting way to understand the perspectives. The idea here that we are normally very quick in making a judgment about somebody else. If somebody else does something, then we simply, you can say, jump to the ground, oh, he is such a bad person. Now this philosopher said that before you can make a judgment about that person that he is a bad person, put yourself into the position of that person and then imagine, had you been in the place of that person, position of that person, had you done something different, chances are high that you might have done the same thing. If you understand that from this way, then you will see that your judgment will be much more balanced. So you will be able to make a much better judgment about that person rather than jumping to the judgment that, okay, he is a bad person. So before you make a judgment about me, walk in my shoes for some time. You should not make a judgment in a, you can say, this manner that I am on this side and make a judgment on somebody on that side. No. Before that, go into the position of that person and then see, and then perhaps you will be in a position to make a judgment. That is what means the perspective taking. There is a beautiful quotation of Buddha in that case. I think Buddha said this. Buddha said, anger is often an act of misunderstanding. When we become angry at a person, then why do we become angry at a person? We become angry at a person because we think that other person has done something which is wrong. But if that person has done something, then he is not a stupid person. He is also an intelligent, rational person. So he must have some perspective. So that from that point of view, he did something. So if you put yourself in that position, if you understand him from that point of view, then perhaps you will know why did he do something which you feel is wrong. Perhaps your understanding would be much better. So very often when we become angry in our life, it is just a lack of understanding maybe. This is what misunderstanding may be. This is what perhaps Buddha said. There is another, you can say, quotation of Leo Tolstoy about that issue. Tolstoy had said that to understand all is to forgive all. Now that's a beautiful way to say same thing. If you understand somebody well, then perhaps it will be much easier for you to forgive that person, even if you think that person has done something wrong. And forgiving plays a very important role in the social reconciliation process. So that is what you can say perspective taking and empathy means. Understand person from their point of view. Otherwise, our understanding will be wrong. It will be a misunderstanding. You know, some time ago, somebody had posted an interesting illustration on my Facebook page. I hope many of you may have seen it. In that illustration, there were two people standing in front of each other, A and B, and they were fighting with each other. And what was the fight for? Fight was for this thing that in between them, there was a image like this. And he was saying that it is 6 and he was saying that it is 9. And they were fighting with each other on that. Now the question is that who was right? Both of them were right. Who was wrong? None of them. But still they were fighting. Most often our fight is just about that. So most often, well, our fight is just about that. So this person say you don't know the maths and he say you don't know the maths. Both of them know maths. Only thing is that his perspective is something else and his perspective is something else. From his perspective, same thing appears like 6. From that perspective, same thing appears like 9. So if he understand that if he is on the other side, he will also see it as a 9. His fight will be, his point will be invalid after that. And he will, if he imagines, had he been in the position of that person, he will also see it as 6 only. So if both of them do that, then both of them will understand each other better. Both of them will know that nobody is wrong. Both of them are equally right, even if they see two different things. So that is why there is a beautiful quotation of Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, one of my favorite philosophers. Nietzsche had said that there is no fact, only interpretations. There is no truth, only perspectives. Now, there is interesting thing. He said there is no fact. Facts do not exist in the world. Only thing that exists is the interpretation. Every fact is our interpretation of fact in a way. And there is no truth. Truth does not exist in the world. They are only perspective. So we can only see the perspective. We can never see the truth. Truth is beyond our comprehension maybe. Truth is beyond, if that exists maybe. There is no truth. They are only perspective. I hope you remember in some other class earlier, I have talked about that story of Jainism, that an elephant and the 7 blind men. So 7 blind men watched, touched the elephant and they gave a different report. How does the elephant look? Who was right? Well, who was wrong in that case? At least none of them. Who was right? All of them were right in their own way. So if in this sense you can say nobody will be wrong perhaps. People are right in their own way, their own perspective, from their own point of view. Empathy means that understand the point of view of the other person, that perhaps make you better to understand. And that better understanding will ultimately lead to the reconciliation and resolution of the conflict. That is the meaning of this third point that we talked about. They understand others' perspectives well and show sensitivity towards them. I think many questions are there. Before we proceed, let us see some questions. Vidisha Sarkar. Sir, lots of people pray for the betterment of their future. Can we say this is optimism? This is hope. So in this case, prayer does not change anything. We do not have any direct evidence for that. So this can be considered to be hope rather than essentially optimism. Nimai. Sir, there are few people who are very talkative. They keep on talking without taking a little break. Nimai. Well, that is a bad communication further. As I told you in some other class earlier, that if you talk only for the sake of talking, then most often you will talk nonsense. Remember that we had talked about in that class, impulse control class further. So such people often speak nonsense, and after that is not something that to be taken much into consideration. Next question, sir, how to recognize these good listeners? Well, there are ways. First of all, if you talk to the other person, you will be able to understand that he is a good listener. We often get the feeling that he listens well, number one. But there are methods also. Experimental method, there are some measurable quantity. I think our class does not permit to go into that much of detail. But remember, we can, just as I told you that we can make a sensitivity profile of a person, we can make listening profile also. So there are methods through which we can measure actually how well the other person listens. So much research has been done in this area. But again, our course is a little limited in that sense. We don't have to go that much of detail. Only thing that you remember, we can understand the listening. We can measure listening, we can say So listening. Similarly, you can perspective taking profile also we can make. So we all have done a significant amount of research in all these areas for the last few decades. So all of these things can be measured, can be identified, can be somehow even quantified. Some graph can be made, some curve can be made, some profile can be made. But our time does not permit to go into that. Next question, Nimai. So it is said that to be a good speaker, you have to be a good listener first. Please explain. So very can say correct, Nimai, because unless and until you listen well, your speaking will be very meaningless in that case. So, for example, as I told you that unless and until you can say listen to other person, for example, unless and until you don't understand what I am going to speak in this topic, do you think that you can speak on this topic again? You cannot. Can you ask appropriate question or rephrase the same thing in your language unless and until you don't listen me well? That's why I told you listening is more important than speaking. You must learn to listen first. Only then perhaps you will be able to speak meaningfully. So you must be listener first. That's why we suggested that listening is something that you must learn to understand. Subhasri. Sir, in reality, we see there is always a push to establish someone's perspective as the best one, standard one, and others inferior to them. What I believe that perspectives will survive centuries which had some good qualities in it, and time will filter out those real inferiors. Is there any standard perspective? No. This is what we can say Jan said. Mahavir said that Shadvad, if you remember, we had discussed that Shadvad or Anekantvad also of Mahavir. So there is nothing called, you can say, the 100% correct perspective. So perspectives keep on changing. In everybody, my perspective also was something else. When we change our position, our meaning will change, of course, of life. Perspective keep on changing, but no perspective can be 100% accurate or 100% well right. That is why you can say in the case of this modern ethics that we talk about, liberty or these things that we talk about, liberal ethics and all, we say that everybody's perspective must be given equal respect. Kantian autonomy, it is all about that. So my perspective may be something else, yours must be something else. I must also get equal amount of respect as you, even if we are very different people. So let it evolve automatically rather than imposing a certain perspective on other people. That will create a conflict in the society. Nobody's perspective is 100% right and nobody is 100%. Absolute truth is impossible for us to know. We can know only perspectives. So imposing one perspective on others always create problem in the society. That is what we can say. Last one, I don't proceed further. Fourth one, they help out others. They help out others on the basis of their empathic understanding of others' needs and perspectives. They help out others on the basis of needs and feelings. They help out others on the basis of their empathic understanding of others' needs and feelings. Others' needs and feelings. So this is the last important thing about. So in the first 3 points, I talked about the understanding. So in the first 3 points, we talked about understanding other people only. Now in the last one, we'll talk about, so understand, be sensitive, listen well, understand others' perspective well. But after that, empathy also means that understanding other person is not enough. After that, you must take active step in order to help the other person out of his emotional turbulence maybe. I like to call this particular part of empathy as compassion. That is the basic difference between empathy and one important difference between empathy and compassion. So if you look at compassion, for example, then we say that compassion is a subset of empathy. Suppose, for example, this is empathy, a larger category. A subset of that will be compassion. A subset of that would be compassion may be. So compassion is a special type of empathy in which we try to help the other person out. We take active step in order to help the other person out on the basis of our empathic understanding of the needs of the other person, feelings of the other person. So compassion is always often an action oriented act. Compassion motivates us to do something. Empathy may not that strongly motivate maybe. That also will be empathy. Compassion is often a push to us to do something for the sake of somebody else. Similarly, you can say another quality that we talk about can be sympathy. So sympathy can be one part also. Sympathy can be, so yesterday somebody had asked this question, what is the difference between sympathy and empathy? This is the one difference. Empathy is a larger category. Sympathy, first of all, it can be non-emotional also. It can be simple, you can say the rational maybe, and it can be emotional also, it can be compassionate also. Some amount of activity may be required, some amount of emotional, but it, and other important thing is that between the two, sympathy and empathy, is that sympathy is basically our understanding and effort to help the other person out because of the negative emotion of other person, like sadness, suffering, pain, difficulty, etc. Empathy can be for other emotions as well. So suppose for example that suppose you are in some difficulty. Suppose there is a student, one of my students could not clear the prelims exam this time. Now he is sad. Then I will say, okay, I sympathize with you. Work hard, next time you can do that. So that will be sympathy. But suppose you clear the UPSC exam, you become an IAS officer, you become very happy, of course. And suppose I also feel equal amount of happiness for you, then that will be empathy. That will not be sympathy. I will not say that I sympathize with you. Well, when you clear the, no, that will be very inappropriate word. I can say, okay, I feel empathy for you, I feel so good for you. That will be empathy. Or what happened in, can say that Manipur, can say event. Well, we feel outrage on that. That is empathy, not sympathy. So that will be, so empathy can be for any emotion, fear also, anger also, happiness also, sadness also. But sympathy is mostly for sadness, compassion is mostly action oriented in that sense. If you look at Buddha, for example, then in Buddha's life there were two important events were there. All of you know about that. First event that happened was in Bodh Gaya, where he got enlightenment. But after he got enlightenment, do you know what was the first thing that Buddha did? Well, first thing that Buddha did was that he went to Sarnath and he collected 5 of his old friends there and seekers, and he gave them his first sermon, and those 5 people became his first disciples. Now, this event, there is a special name for this event in the Buddhist literature. I hope that some of you may be aware of that. Well, in Buddhist literature, we call this as Dharmchakra Pravartan. Now, I will say here that enlightenment was an act of self-awareness. That's why we studied enlightenment and 4 noble truths coming out of that as self-awareness part. And the Dharmchakra Pravartan was an act of compassion. Because Buddha, when he got his happy, you can say a solution to his problem, that why do people suffer, he got the answers to his question, that why do people suffer, what is the root of suffering, etc., etc. Then after, well, he got the answer, then after he could have lived his life happily after that. So there was no problem that he could have faced, but he did not do that. He was so moved, he was so pained by the suffering of the humankind that he went to Sarnath, and then after he spent rest of his life to make the world happier. That was an act of compassion. Pain of other people, suffering of other people disturbed him so much that he devoted the rest of his life to make the world happier. That was an act of compassion. And because of that, in Buddhist literature, Dharmchakra Pravartan is considered to be the even more important event in his life than enlightenment also. Because as far as enlightenment is considered, that many other, can say, seekers before Buddha might have got enlightenment in a similar fashion. He was not the first person who got enlightenment. So before him also a number of people got enlightenment, and they lived their life happily after that. What was special about Buddha? That he devoted the rest of his life to make the world happier. That was an act of compassion. It is compassion that made Buddha such a great person, not only enlightenment or self-knowledge. Enlightenment was, compassion was that. Dharmchakra Pravartan was an act of compassion. That also is an important part of empathy. Oh, is there any question? Nayan, yes, sir, is it right to show empathy to those people who did such a cruel act? If an example is not set, then cookies people would do the same thing to Maitais women and this cycle will continue. No, Nayan, we are not saying that there should not be, you can say, punishment should not be given. Empathy does not mean that you don't do the right thing. Empathy simply means that even those people who have done the wrong, they should not be killed in a fake encounter. They should be put in jail, they should be given tried in a court of law, and according to the system that we have, they should be given whatever punishment that they are given. So respecting their right in this manner is empathy, not to let the criminals go free. So empathy is not about that, you can say, empathy should not mean that you allow the people to do the wrong thing and show empathy towards them. Empathy means that even if somebody does the wrong, then also, well, respect their rights in a way, put them in jail and then hang them according to the law, if hanging is appropriate. Our pure anger should not be the reason for the reaction. That can motivate us to take action, but that action finally must be taken. Remember, emotions can be a good guide. It should not be. We often say, there is a beautiful quotation of some philosopher that emotions can say very good servant, but emotions are a bad master. So they are slave, they are servant, but emotion must not be allowed to be a master. Because if you allow the emotions to be master, then there will be chaos in the society. I may get angry at somebody, we may get angry at somebody, then after, well, there can be a chaos in the society. So emotions can create that motivational state inside us where government is for. So 78 days later, Prime Minister spoke because of that. That was power of emotions. Then people were arrested after 60 days of, you can say, 2 months after that event. That is the power of emotion. But emotion must propel us to move in the right direction. But right direction must be finally taken by the, well, I can say, proper methodology that we as a society has established. So we are not suggesting that people, you can say, you should show empathy towards the criminal, and empathy means that let them go. No, that will be extremely wrong. So these are the 4 important things that defines empathy as an emotional competence: being sensitive, listening, understanding, perspective taking, and show compassion. Now that is the idea of empathy as an emotional competence. Now next important thing that I would like to briefly talk about is that if you look at empathy in this sense, then empathy, throughout history, people often thought about empathy as things like empathy, rather, not exactly empathy. Empathy as an important part of a good life, happy life and all, personal life maybe. But for the last few centuries, you can see that we have been talking about the role of empathy even in making people successful in the marketplace, role of empathy in the professional life, role of empathy in the marketplace. So let us talk about role of empathy in the professional life, including in civil service. Historically, if you look at it, then first important philosopher perhaps who talked about the role of empathy in the free market was Adam Smith. Adam Smith had written on was another important book who wrote on emotions also, Theories of Moral Sentiment. He was not only a economic philosopher, he was a moral philosopher also. And people often he of course proposed the idea in that the Wealth of Nations, that book, he talked about the free market economy, etc. And people often misunderstand Adam Smith on one ground. People often think that Adam Smith said that free market economy will be successful mainly because people are selfish. So in the free market, selfish people work for their own self-interest, which make the market successful. No, that is not what he meant. He said that free market economy is going to be successful not because people are selfish. Free market economy will be successful because people are empathic. Empathy is something that will make free market successful. Well, of course, he did not use the term empathy because at his time, empathy was not the term that existed. He used the term sympathy. But sympathy was considered to be later on a very constricted word. So many people, you can say, invented the word. You can say this word invented in 20th century by a psychologist called Thorndike. So it is a new term. It did not exist in the, well, time of Adam Smith or Kant, etc. Empathy is a very new word, a new coinage in a way. Now, but he meant the same thing. So, let's use this word to describe his idea. So, he said, Adam Smith, that free market economy will be successful not because, well, people are not only because people are selfish, but more importantly because people are empathic. Why so? Suppose, for example, market is free and I am a selfish person. I want to succeed in the market. I want to earn lots of profit. Suppose, for example, in order to earn profit, if I make only that product which makes me happier, then do you think that I will ever succeed in the market? Of course not. In order to succeed in the market, I must make products which make other people happier. So I must understand what makes other happy. So secondly, I must make those products that make other people, that reduces other people's suffering. I must understand the suffering of the other people. So if I understand that if you suffer, then can I make something to eliminate your suffering? If I can make that product, I will be successful. So only those people will succeed in the market who are high in empathy. They understand other people's emotions well, who understand others' happiness, fear, anger, sadness, suffering, etc. So only these things make people successful in the market. Windows has been a successful software operating system mainly because of empathy. We say Windows is an empathic software. Why it is so? Because it makes people feel good when we act on Windows, for example. All the beautiful pictures, images, colors, animation, etc. that makes people feel good. So only those products in the market will be successful which makes people feel good, comfortable, reduce their suffering, reduce their fear, reduce their anxiety, reduce their suffering. And in order to do that, you have to understand what makes people feel these things. So empathy alone will make marketplace successful. So that is the role of empathy in the market. Free market as said by Adam Smith also. But in modern time, many research has been done that empathy plays even more important role in such a job in which the job of the people involve direct interaction with each other. So direct interaction, person to person interaction, then empathy becomes even more important, and one such job is the medical science. One such job is the medical science. So doctors succeed mostly because of their empathy. Empathy alone makes doctors successful in their, well, business, in their profession. I remember one research that was conducted. Suppose, for example, there are two doctors, say A and B. Suppose A is very high in empathy on all those four criteria of, can say, empathy, and B is very low in empathy. It was normally found that when a patient goes to a doctor, then they have around 3 to 4 questions in their mind which they plan to ask from the doctors about their illness. It was found further that when a patient goes to this doctor, then on an average, a patient was able to ask around 1 to 2 questions only. And it was also found that when a patient started speaking about his problem, then this doctor interrupted him within the first 17 seconds. First interruption took place after 17 seconds on an average. In terms of counter question or any others, now okay, I understand that, there's no need to speak more. You stop the other person from speaking. This person, on the other hand, the patient going to this doctor, they were able to ask around 3 to 4 questions, and first interruption take place in around 35 seconds. At least 35 seconds, this doctor listened patiently, and then after a counter question maybe possibly was asked. And because of that, it was found that these doctors were sued more by their patients. In America, you know, suing is a big problem for the doctors. In India, we are nice people. Because when we are unhappy with the doctor, then maximum that we do is to change the doctor. Or if you are a very, you can say, grumpy person maybe, then you become a bad advertisement. You tell everybody in the society around you that don't go to that doctor, he is such a bad doctor. So beyond that, we don't do anything, but Americans are not so nice. When they are unhappy with the doctor, then they sue the doctor in a court of law. Medical cost is high, insurance is there, and all of that. So suing is a big problem that every doctor in America is worried about. So they were sued more by their patients. They, on the other hand, they were able to do much better diagnosis. And because of that, their medication was found to be more effective. their medication was also found to be more effective. Why so? Because suppose for example, when a patient goes to a doctor, then a patient may have 10 symptoms, that I have a headache also, I have a body ache also, I have stomach ache also, I have this also, I have that also, 10 symptoms. But at the root of all these 10 symptoms, there might be a single problem. So if you listen patiently, then perhaps you will be able to identify the root cause of all the problem easily, better maybe, and diagnosis will become, medication can be more effective. And in this case again, you can say if you don't listen, then perhaps you will never understand what exactly is root of the problem. So their medication was more effective, and well, because of that they were able to charge higher fees also in comparison to that. That is what was found. Now here it may appear to some people that this Dr. A, he might be spending lots of time with his patient. People often think that empathy is, well, time consuming because you have taken so much of time to listen to the other person. That is a big misconception. Empathy is not time consuming, because in that research that I remember, that these doctors on an average, they spend around only 3 minutes extra. They spend only 3 minutes extra per patient in comparison to the second doctor, and can say the second doctor. So just by spending 3 minutes extra, they were able to have so much of advantages. Think of it. Empathy is not time consuming. Empathy does not require much time. It requires a little effort. That effort is to be there, that you have to put in when you are trying to interact with the other person, trying to understand the other person. Medical profession is one such profession where empathy is very, very important. Another profession where you can say empathy is as important is the police. It was found that police officers who are high in empathy and self-control, police officers who are high in empathy, and remember empathy, as I told you just a little earlier also, that empathy and self-control often goes together. So both of them often go together. So the people who are high in empathy and self-control, well, police officer, in there, suppose there are two officers A and B, A high in empathy and self-control and B low in that. It was found that in their area, the number of FIR was found to be less in comparison to those second police officers who were not so good in that. Why so? Think of it. Suppose for example, you are a police officer in charge of your police station. Two people are fighting with each other. They come to you to file an FIR against each other. Now, if you are empathic, then first of all you will try to listen to both of them, and if you listen patiently, then you may be able to understand, you can reduce their anger, you can help them to compromise maybe, rather than filing an FIR. So they were able to make better compromises among the people, prevent them from filing an FIR and burdening the police officers, and they on the other hand, they were not able, they actually exacerbated the problem. So it is found in London police also, I have mentioned that in some other class earlier also, self-control class. A research was done that police officers, traffic policemen who are high in empathy and self-control, in their area, number of road rage case was found to be less in comparison to those who are other one. So it is normally seen that in such a job like medical profession, police, other bureaucratic job, etc., empathy along with self-control is found to play a very important role to make the person successful in that case. So empathy is very important for economic success, professional success of the individual as well. So that is the role of empathy, that is the importance of empathy in the professional field. If there is a question on that, you must define empathy in those questions, describe that and give some example of such profession where empathy is such an important thing to make the person successful. Let me take a question. Biswajit, so those advertisements see in TV or social media, is it basis our empathy? Biswajit, it is not basis of our empathy, it is actually because of the empathy of the other people. Their understanding of our emotions, well, make them to make a better advertisement. But empathy is an important part of the advertisement also. Anybody, you can say, look at any marketplace, they always try to appeal to your emotions. So these advertisements are also an important part of our empathic relationship with the advertiser. And think about many some iconic advertisements, Hamara Bajaj, or you can see Amul girl, for example. So these things create such a strong, you can say, feelings among the people that people feel connected with that, and that ultimately makes the market success. So many advertisement, iconic advertisements like this, for example, Well, actually has created emotional bond between the people and the brand. So it's very important part of branding that you must create emotional connect with the people. Empathy is the same. Empathy is that glue that brings people, I can say, closer to the brand that is being promoted. Yes, empathy is an important part of advertisement. So that is all about empathy, various aspects of empathy. Now, next important thing that I would like to briefly talk about further is, till this point we have been talking about empathy as a great thing, all good. But do you think that empathy is always good? Or can there be a situation where empathy can be problematic also? Yes, that also has been found, and that is exactly what we will talk about next. So let us see what can be the possible negative aspect of empathy. Change the paragraph and then after write further some other aspects of empathy. Some other aspects of empathy. First one, write down empathy avoidance. Empathy avoidance. Write down a few lines. In some situations, a very high empathy, in some situations, a very high empathy may hamper our performance. A very high empathy may hamper our performance rather than improving it. May hamper our performance rather than improving it. For example, I go on further. For example, while making a negotiation or while implementing a tough and difficult decision, or in the distribution of resource, etc., 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 etc. Distribution of resource, etc., etc. In such cases, we must learn. In such cases, we must learn how to control. We must learn how to control our empathic tendencies. We must learn how to control our empathic tendencies without reducing our general empathy. Without reducing our general empathy. Wait for a minute. Well, now in these situations it is normally seen that empathy can be a problem rather than negotiation, for example. What is a negotiation? Now negotiation is that process in which two people have some differences with each other, number one. Number two, both of them want to resolve their disagreement, and number three, while resolving the disagreement, both of them try to bargain with each other. And in bargaining, both of them try to give minimum to the other person and take maximum out of the other person. Maximum out of the. So the ultimate purpose of negotiation is to give minimum and take maximum. Now, in the case of, can say, sometimes it may happen that some people use their emotions to influence your decision and take more from you by using emotion than rationally you otherwise should have done. That will create, you will become, well, victim in that case. Suppose, for example, think of it. Suppose, for example, you are a manager in a company, and as on behalf of your company, you are conducting a job interview. And suppose you select a person, do you offer him, okay, I will give you a job. You interview a person and you offer him a job, I will give you a job, and you tell that person that I will give you, say, offer you 10,000 as salary. But the moment you give 10,000 rupees as salary, suddenly suppose this person starts crying in front of you, sir, it is too less for me, that I have a big family, 3 children are there, all of 3 go to school, mother is sick, she is in hospital always, I have to marry my sister. So all these things, a very sorry picture of his family life he is portraying against you. So please sir, please make it at least 12,000. Now suppose you are very empathic, you are very moved by how bad this person's life is. Okay, chalo, let me give him 2,000 extra. If you do so, then, well, in this case you are doing two wrong. First wrong that you are doing is that you are actually doing injustice to, you can say being disloyal to your organization, putting extra financial burden on it. Secondly, you are doing injustice to other people in your company who are doing the same job similar job in 10,000 rupees. So new person is getting more salary than somebody else who is doing your job earlier. So that will create that is injustice, and that will create dissatisfaction among the other people as well. So in such a case, you can say in common language we call this as, in day-to-day language we often call it as emotional blackmail. So sometimes some people try to emotionally blackmail us. Try to emotionally blackmail. They use emotions in order to change our opinion. We give in more, and later on we regret. We feel bad about ourselves. We feel being manipulated. We feel being used by the other person. So that is a condition that where sometimes we can, for people who are highly empathic, they can find themselves in that condition, or while implementing a tough and difficult decision. As a civil servant, sometimes we may have to implement a very difficult decision, and which that people may not like. But for the long term goal, you can say policy goals, you have to implement that. So in this case, you must control your empathy. There are many civil servants, officers who because of their empathy are not able to show that toughness in a difficult situation, and that ultimately leads them to fail. So in such a situation, we must learn how to avoid our empathic tendencies without necessarily reducing our general empathy. So reducing general empathy is not a desirable thing. We don't expect that you should reduce your general empathy. Only thing that we expect is that, only thing that we suggest is that we can say control your empathic tendency, avoid it. So when you are going in negotiation, then be clear in your mind that today I will not allow my emotions to be influencing in me. My decision must be made on the basis of the rational fact, not on the basis of emotional disturbance. So if you are not able to control and avoid it, you may be in trouble sometimes. It's very important for us to control our empathy in that sense. That is the first important thing that we need to remember. Second is, write down further, politics of empathy. Politics of empathy. That is another very important thing that we need to remember. Now, before we talk about politics of empathy, can you tell me what exactly is the meaning of the term politics? Well, politics is not only about Congress and BJP and NDA and India. Politics is more about, you can say, power. Politics is very important part of every human relationship. So everywhere and politics is not always bad. Politics with integrity is good. Politics without principles is bad. So politics is essentially about power. That whenever we try to gain power over somebody else, power means what? Our ability to influence others' behavior. So when we try to gain power and influence others' behavior, then that attempt is called politics. Politics is all about power. Now in empathy also a very important political component has been found to exist here. What is the politics of that? Think of it. Suppose for example there are two people, say A and B. Suppose both of them are working in the same organization. He is the immediate boss and he is the immediate junior, superordinate and subordinate, senior and the junior. Both of them are in this relationship of super and subordination for a period of time like 2 years, 3 years, 5 years or so. Now in such a situation, what do you think that whose empathy in this case would be more towards the other? Can say in this relationship, whose empathy will be more towards the other? Well, I hope some of you may have thought about. In such a situation, it is found that empathy of a junior officer would be more than empathy of a senior officer towards the other. Why so? Think of it. Suppose you are a junior officer, and as a junior officer, whenever you talk to your boss, you will always be careful about the mood of your boss. Suppose, for example, you have to share a bad information with your boss. Bad news. Now, suppose you go to tell him the bad news. Suddenly you find that your boss is very angry, irritated. Now you know that it is not the right time to talk to him. You keep quiet. And after some time, you see that your boss is smiling. The moment you see your boss is smiling, then, well, you know that it is the appropriate time. You simply say, sir, there is a bad news. So idea is that whenever you as a junior will interact with your boss, then you will always try to see his mood, his emotions, whether he is feeling good, bad, he is angry, irritated, frustrated, happy, whatever you can see. So, and on the basis of that, you will judge your own action, what I should do there. Your boss, on the other hand, he does not have to bother about your emotion anytime. He can scold you at any time without bothering about whether you feel good or bad now. So, even if initially both of you may have equal amount of empathy, but if you are in this relationship, slowly, your empathy will increase and your boss's empathy will decrease. So, this change in empathy because of the power is what we call the politics of empathy. So, write down a few lines here. When a power relationship exists, when a power relationship exists between two people, then normally the people with less power, often have more empathy the people with less power often have more empathy towards the people with less power will often have more empathy towards the powerful person than the vice versa. The powerful people, one more line you can write, the powerful people often use their lack of empathy as a way of lack of empathy or powerful people often use their lack of empathy or this you can write in double quote, I don't care attitude or I don't care attitude as a way of assertion of their power. As a way of assertion of their power. Powerful people often use their lack of empathy as a way of assertion of their power. So this is what is found, that if there is a power relationship exists between two people like say A and B, then the less powerful people often have more empathy towards the powerful person, and powerful person often will have less empathy towards the powerless person. So powerful person like A, for example, he uses his lack of empathy, which we sometimes also called I don't care attitude, as a way of assertion of his power, that I am a powerful person, I don't have to care for you. Well, so whether you feel bad, I don't care. Are you angry? I don't care. I don't have to, because I am a powerful person. So this attitude that the powerful people often grow is you can say is something that we call, so that becomes a assertion of power. Because of that, it has been seen that in many situations, in many research, it has been seen. And suppose, for example, you join an organization. I suppose this is the Suppose, for example, this is the power hierarchy of your organization. Then suppose this is the power hierarchy, and suppose you join the organization at the bottom, at lower level, and you keep on rising up by promotion. Keep on rising up as a promotion. Then after, parallel to that, it has been found that empathy of the people often reduces because of that. Between empathy and power, some type of inverse correlation has been found. That more power people have, less will be their empathy. Less power people have, more will be their empathy. So that is a type of correlation has been found across the situations and all. Do you remember that in one more competence that we had discussed earlier, a similar type of correlation was found between power and an emotional competence? I hope that some of you may remember that. We had talked about this in accurate self-assessment. So we had seen in that class that people who become more powerful, their accurate self-assessment often reduces. This type of thing also we have seen there. Accurate self-assessment often reduces, and because of the imbalance in the feedback, they get more positive feedback and they stop getting the negative feedback. And we had seen it. So similar correlation has been found between the empathy also. In that class, I had told you that people who fail at the top of the organization, the most important reason of their failure is the lack of accurate self-assessment. And today we will see that the second most important reason of their failure is the lack of empathy. So these are the two important competences, accurate self-assessment and empathy. Both of them reduces with power normally. And because of that, powerful people, because of these two problems, powerful people often fail. So their failure is mostly because, their failure is not because of the incompetence. Their failure is mostly because of these two emotional competences. It is actually seen that if you look at reverse of empathy, can we call arrogance. Arrogance. Arrogance is found to be directly proportional to the power. Arrogance. So power and arrogance. Power often, lack of empathy is called arrogance. I don't care. This is called arrogance. I don't care. Attitude. So it is normally seen that more power people have, more arrogant they become. Power breeds arrogance, and that arrogance that power brings, well, often leads to the downfall of the powerful people. Anywhere in the world you can see that people fail because of many times. People fail because of the arrogance of power. So that is how the problem actually begins. Now, look at this thing again. This power can have many sources. Here we talked about power as a formal system. Power can be formal, like formal power when you are working in an office and your organization gives you more power, like A. That is a formal power, but power can be informal also. For example, power can have racial, or race also can be a origin of power. So in American society, for example, white people are more powerful and blacks are less powerful. So whites in America are less caring towards the plight and pain, suffering of the black, and blacks are more caring towards suffering of the white in general. There is a quotation of Martin Luther King Jr. I hope some of you may have seen that, a famous quotation. He said, Martin Luther King Jr., who fought for the rights of the blacks in America during the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. Now, Martin Luther King Jr., for example, when he had said that whenever I go, I'm quoting him, he said, whenever I go out in the American society, then you can see that I am appalled. I am shocked by looking at it, that how you can say less caring white people in America are towards the suffering of the blacks, and how more caring black people in America are towards the suffering of the whites. This is what he said there. Now, this is fact again, many research has been done. Suppose, for example, there are two people are sitting in a park somewhere, black and white. After 20 minutes, for example, you ask a white person that there was a person sitting beside you just, you can say 2 minutes ago. Can you tell me what was his emotion, his mood? Chances are high he will say, I don't know. But if you ask a black person that there was a white person sitting beside you, can you tell me, there was a person sitting beside you, can you tell me his mood? Chances are high that he might tell you that he was very angry perhaps. He appeared to be very angry, irritated, very happy, very relaxed. He would be able to tell you some indication about the mood of that person. Idea is that white people, when they look at the black, they look at the body. And when black people look at the white, they more look at the body language. That is what empathy is, going slightly beyond the body and to understand the person into it. Power can have social origin also. In a country like India, for example, upper caste and the lower caste people. So throughout history, you can say that extreme, you can say indignified job have been forced upon the lower caste people. Nobody even thinks about that. You know, just can say, just yesterday or the day before yesterday, I was reading some, I can say, post on Twitter, when the person said every year in India, you know, a number of, can say, people die in cleaning the sewer. When the people go into the sewer to clean it, and they, because of asphyxiation or poison, etc., they die. Every year a number of people in India die cleaning sewer. And 100% case, those people who die cleaning sewer are the lower caste people. Now, somebody wrote in some Twitter post yesterday that if, can say, if you get the news that a person who was cleaning sewer died and his name was, and he gave some name. So, surnames were all, well, upper caste surname. If 10 upper caste people will die in the sewer, cleaning sewer, then next month onwards, so you can say that everywhere in the country sewer will be cleaned by machine. Human cleaning will be. So, since just because you can say lower caste people die, it is just a routine. And if upper caste people start dying, then after it will be prohibited again. Then after machine, can say cleaning will be there. So, the people are less caring about the plight of the lower caste people than the plight of the upper caste people. Power can have economic origin also. The rich people and the poor people. So, when something wrong happens to the poor people, it does not create much concern. A slum is, can say, demolished, for example, it is just a corner news in a newspaper. And when a farmhouse is demolished, for example, it becomes a big news here. Rich people often dismiss the plight and suffering of the, oh, they are just like that. They are vermins. They sleep like dogs, they die like dogs. This is what people say. So, that is again a lack of empathy, arrogance. Power can have political power also. Just think of it, ruling party and the opposition party. Ruling party and opposition party. So, I find it so interesting that when the parties are in, some political party is in opposition, then they talk so much about the plight of the poor people like farmers, laborers, etc. But the day they gain power, they take the oath of power, suddenly you can see the change in their attitude. They become so arrogant. So, idea is that whatever may be the source of power, it is normally seen that more powerful people become more arrogant they become. Less powerful people are normally more empathic in that case. So, power and empathy is found to be very closely, whatever is the source of power has been found to be closely related to each other. You know, there is a beautiful quotation of Abraham Lincoln about that. And interestingly, this quotation was actually asked in the UPSC exam a few years ago. It was a UPSC question. And you can answer this question on this point of view with these examples. Quotation was that, and I am quoting Abraham Lincoln, he had said that adversity anybody can handle. But if you want to see the character of a person, then give him power. Now that was a very interesting thing to say. Adversity anybody can handle. This is what he said. We all handle adversities in our life. We all handle, because even the poorest of the poor people handle it. That's not as part of your character. Just because you handle the difficulties and problems of your life, that is not your character. If you want to see the character of the person, give him power. It is not easy to handle power. It is not easy to manage power. Power often makes people arrogant. Power makes people corrupt. So your ability to handle power is the true reflection of your character. There is another beautiful quotation, a more you can say appropriate or better quotation for Gandhi on the same topic. Gandhi also had said that if you want to see the character of the person, then see that how does he behave with servant, not with his boss. How does he behave with his servant? That is what will tell you about the character of the person. Now this is also interesting. Suppose for example, you are A and suppose B is your boss and C is your servant. Then how do you behave with your boss is not your character, because you will always behave nicely with your boss. You cannot be arrogant with him, he is your boss. So your behavior with your boss is your compulsion, is not your character. So you are compelled to behave nicely with your boss. That is a compulsion, that is a situational constraint. But how do you behave with a servant, that Gandhi said is a sign of your character. Because if you with your boss, you can never be arrogant. But if you can be arrogant here, but instead of becoming arrogant, you choose to be nice with your servant, then that is your character. So if you can say, so that is your character because you do it yourself. There is no situational pressure on you, but still you do it. If you use the Kantian terminology, then we can possibly say that this might be an example of heteronomous act and this could be an example of an autonomous act. So in this case, the situation, the power position is actually making you to be nice with your boss. In this case, there is no power position, there is no constraint, there is no external determination. You could be arrogant also, you could be nice also. If you become nice, then that is your choice, that is your autonomy. Kant will say it might be a moral act, it might be an amoral act. So Gandhi also said the same thing, that if you want to see the character of a person, then just see that how does he behave his servant. Don't you can say talk much about how does he treat his boss. That is not his character. So this is what. So all these things can be understood with reference to the politics of empathy. So there was a question about that Abraham Lincoln's can say quotation, and in many other questions we can use these ideas of politics and empathy, power and empathy. So that is the meaning of the term politics and empathy. Now there is another very important aspect of politics of empathy also that we have to talk about a little. That we will talk about after a break. So after the break we will talk about that what is the other last important aspect of politics of empathy itself and empathy as such as a whole. We will talk about that after the break.